Fine. Okay. Right. Well, welcome all. Obviously, a slightly smaller selection of people than I think that you always get a bit of fallout at the last minute. Thanks, obviously, mostly to Helen for sharing her time with us this morning. So we thought, following some sessions that we've done with Nick, that it would be sort of a good thing to do. Everyone's had a really challenging last 16-17 months, and I don't think those challenges have disappeared at all. So we've all got a lot to face over the coming months ahead. Obviously we've got a lot of expertise in the Oxfordshire community, and we just thought it'd be a good idea to try and bring all that together and sort of help people through the challenges that they face. So, and we'll be running a series of these every month with different individuals with different areas of expertise, and Helen will be kicking us off with our inaugural MGroup Business Club event. So Helen will be able to tell us all a bit more about herself, I'm sure, and will do a much better job of that than I could. So I'll hand over to you if that's okay then, Helen. Has everybody got their microphones muted? Or yeah, it looks like it. Just me then. All right, over to you then, Helen. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just let Jeff in. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I'm more than happy for this to be as interactive as possible. You don't want to listen to me talk solidly for 30 minutes. I've got a couple of polls in there as well. So my name's Helen Joy. My business is PeopleSpark, and my focus is helping businesses to get their managers to their maximum capability in order for them to support their teams to, again, reach their maximum potential as well. So very much focused around management and leadership development and team dynamics and team development as well. Today, what I'm going to talk about is how the business landscape is changing. Things were already starting to change before COVID. It's just exacerbated all of that. So I want to talk a bit more about that. Then I'm going to look at the skills that managers actually need now, what the impact of not developing those skills would be, and also how you can start to support your managers to develop those skills as well. Okay, so I do have some slides. I will try not to do death by PowerPoint. Bear with me. I will just do what I always do and forget to share my screen until I've actually done that, because I've got two screens. So bear with me. You wouldn't think I'd been doing this for the best part of 18 months, would you? Right, so I'm going to share that screen because that should be where my slides pop up. Can you now see the screen and not the presenter view, which is that fantastic?
Yeah, okay.
Brilliant. Always a good start, isn't it, when you get the right slides up? Okay. So as I said, the world has changed massively over the last 18 months. It was already, oh, what's going on with my, there we go. So do you remember when the employer-employee contract was simple? When you turned up to work, some of you will remember this particular office too. You did your hours, you did your tasks, and then you went home. And you repeated that for about 30 years, and everyone knew exactly where they stood. There was the occasional promotion thrown in for good measure, and then you retired to enjoy your final salary pension for about the 10 years that you survived after retiring from the workplace. And the motivation came from earning enough money to pay your bills, have a holiday in the sun maybe, and then a bit left over for the nicer things in life. And we all knew exactly where we stood. Now things aren't quite as simple. I'll just do that. So there we go. People want purpose in their lives. They want variety, they want flexibility, they want inspiring goals and charismatic leaders who share their own vision and values and who are working towards a better future for everybody, not just a few years of golf and a bit of WI cake making at the end of it all. So these are extremes, but the last 18 months have accelerated a pace of change that actually has been coming along for quite a while. And for many years, people have been pushing for a bit more flexibility within their work. And as technology's made that easier, it's been something that has come to the fore for a lot more people. I remember reading a survey in 2015 that said that by 2020, 50% of people would be working from home. And at the time I laughed at that, because who'd have thought that in 5 years we'd have actually got to a point where we were all working from home. And then look what happened. Look where we were in 2020 with significantly more people working from home. What I just want to check is, oh, I don't know, can I do it from, that's the one thing I forgot, is actually doing my polls. You can't actually do your polls when you're sharing your screen, can you? I forgot about that bit. I'm just going to stop sharing for a second, because what I want to do is a quick poll, which is, moving forward, what will be the primary work location for your teams? So where will people be working primarily?
We have to sort of pick one.
Yeah, so which will be the primary? So if they're doing three days in one place, that'll be their primary working space. If they're doing 3 days in the office, their business location will be their primary location. Okay, so has everyone voted? Mm-hmm. Excellent. So that's really, really interesting there, that 86% primarily will be working from home. What's interesting is that's not indicative of the broader workforce and the broader workplace. So that does actually tend to be flipped the other way around. So I'll go into some more statistics later. Okay, so I'll stop sharing those and then reshare my screen. Okay. So the other major change in the work landscape is that we actually now have 4 generations working across the same workplaces in quite a few cases. And these 4 generations actually want very, very different things from their working lives and from their work environments. So that adds an extra layer of challenge. So what's happened with COVID is where we've all started to work from home. We've seen the benefits of the flexibility, but actually for Generation X and the baby boomers, there's still, for a lot of people, that kind of urgent inclination to go back to what happened before. Whereas for your Generation Z and your millennials, actually focusing on exactly the way that they want their work lives to go. So there is this massive mindset shift that needs to happen for those 2 older generations, most of whom are the ones who are making the decisions and making the choices about where people will be living, will be working. So there are benefits to having that multi-generational workplace. There's lots of knowledge sharing, there's lots of different perspectives, and it actually helps to improve client relationships because you have that much broader perspective. What you can also get is some challenges, which are lack of shared interest and values, and also increased chances of conflict, because, as I said, there's that different mentality and different mindset between those older generations and those younger generations. So another quick, before I go to that one, another quick poll. Question 2. Which is, which generation do most of your people fall into? Okay, so a reminder, Generation Z is born in 96 to 2000. Gen Y is the 80s to 84. Generation X is 64 to 80. And Generation baby boomers are 45 to 64. There is also the traditionalists who are now in their 70s, and you do find, certainly for some of the clients from within the MGroup, you will probably have businesses that may have business owners or founders who are still in that traditionalist age group as well. So what you'll find for them is that there's a significant shift between the different mindsets that happen in between. So we've got 6 out of 7 voted there. So pretty.
Who's abstained?
I don't know. Sandy, is that you?
I didn't want to guess and skewer your results.
Okay, we'll go with the 6 then. That's
I thought I'll let the experts put it in rather. I don't want to skew the results.
Fantastic. Well, what we've got there is an absolute 50-50 split of where the majority of people actually work. And what you will probably find in a lot of organizations is that is in fact an accurate representation, because the millennials now make up 50% of the workforce. So that is where some of the challenges are coming, because the people making the decisions are still in what's known as the industrial era mindset, which is a 9-to-5 workplace, working a certain number of hours a day, working a certain number of weeks a year, and working from an office. And then we've got a whole 50% of that workforce now is coming in with very, very different perceptions and different ways of wanting to do things as well. Okay, so I'm just going to flick back to here. It's going to get slicker every time. Okay, so some statistics. Now, statistics can do whatever you want them to do, really, can't they? And you pick and choose the statistics that fit your narrative. But these are just some really interesting ones, some around looking at that flexibility in terms of not just where people work from, but also how they work. There's a significant increase in the amount of people that do not want to work full time. They don't want permanent jobs. And that actually goes across all of those 4 generations that are in the workplace at the moment. It's not just those millennials and those Generation Zs that are wanting that flexibility in terms of hours. Predominantly, they've driven that because they have different priorities. For them, work is not the same driver as it was for Generation X and the baby boomers. There's also lots of factors around the fact that millennials plan to move on faster. They are driven by career progression. They plan to stay in places long enough to get experience and then move on. And they also are quite happy to move sideways in order to get the right experience to get them onto the next stage in a way that probably generations before them would have struggled to do that. And predominantly, and I love this one here, where 85% of people want that hybrid approach, but the majority of businesses, or not, but quite a lot of businesses expect people to be back in the workplace. So again, it's that mindset shift between the 2 factors. Stop sharing. I don't know if it's more off-putting to keep stopping and starting sharing, but actually I find it's just easier to be able to talk and actually see people, because otherwise I can just see one little thing in the corner. So it's a bit nicer to actually be able to see faces when I'm talking. So fundamentally, the past 18 months have just shown people what's possible and actually proven that it works, because so many organizations were very, very resistant to people working from home and being more flexible in their approach. And actually, we've been forced into realizing that it does actually work. And for some people, it can be a real bonus and a real benefit. And what's actually happening is that the shift is going from employer to employee. So some more statistics. In America, in April, 4 million people quit their jobs. That's the highest record ever. And they quit for a variety of reasons, but the predominant reason that was given was for more flexibility, because their employers weren't prepared to give them that. And in a UK survey, 1/3 of respondents said that they were looking to change roles in the next 6 to 12 months. So if you think about your organisation just for a moment, what would the impact be of 1/3 of your workforce resigning in the next 6 to 12 months? So that flexibility has actually become a really, really highly valued criteria for people, and not just for those millennials and those baby boomers. So expectations of what people want are now very, very different. I know a recruiter who is now refusing to take on jobs that are purely office-based because they know they won't be able to fill them. They've actually turned away roles on that basis because it's not worth it, because it's the way that they get paid. It's not worth them actually spending the amount of time to not fill a vacancy, which is a massive thing, because I worked in recruitment, and that invoice is to reject jobs is quite a big thing. what people are looking for is really, really different now. So they're looking for flexible work patterns, they're looking for flexible work locations, they're looking for mental health benefits, and they're looking for things like unlimited sick pay. Now, I don't know about you, but hearing those as things that people are looking for made my brain go, ah, because that is so the antithesis of the way the traditional workforce and the traditional workplace that we've been in, which is if somebody came into an interview and said, what are your sick pay benefits? Straight away, those little alarm bells are going off in your head going, well, why do you want to know that? But actually, it's around that flexibility, and it's around looking at, when we're looking at broadening and diversifying our workforces, if we're looking at getting people into the workforce who maybe come from previously untapped sources, they may be people who have more health issues, they may have mental health issues, and actually bringing them into the workforce, that sick benefit might actually be an advantage for them to get them in. And actually, when they're in the workplace, the work that they can deliver makes up for the fact that sometimes they can't actually be there as well. So the challenge for workplaces at the moment is, how do you balance your existing workplace and your existing processes and systems of working with the expectations of the workforce that you've got out there? So the key skills that your managers need now, if I show my screen. The first one is communication. Now, that old chestnut, we always talk about communication being a massive skill for managers, but actually the level and the type of communication now are different. We're talking about communication as a two-way experience. Quite often communication is the cascading of information downwards through organizations, but actually it's about listening to people. It's about having conversations that don't just revolve around tasks, objectives, goal setting, but actually getting to know people on a one-to-one basis. And that doesn't always happen. So it's about conversation as communication rather than just distilling down information. And it's about active listening. Now, we all think we're better listeners than we are. It's a categorical fact. And generally, if I was in a session where we had more time, I'd actually do an active listening session, because it always frightens people how they don't listen properly. And just some really quick tips, 5 quick tips to actually listen more attentively, is to pay attention. And I know that sounds really simple, but it is to focus on what's being said and to clear your mind of everything else that would be running through there. Show that you're listening. So doing things like asking questions, things like eye contact, those things, giving feedback as you're going through the conversation, and mirroring or confirming what's been said, making sure that you defer judgment. So don't get halfway through listening to a sentence and start making judgments about what they're saying, because you might have missed the key part, and then responding appropriately. So we can talk about that in a moment. In fact, I should talk about that now. Okay. Who thinks they're a good listener? Only one person brave enough to say that.
Helen, what did you say? Sorry.
Very droll, Peter, very droll.
I would say you're a good listener, Pete. I don't want to blow smoke at your trumpet because that's against my nature, but I would say you're a good listener.
It's hard, I think, sometimes.
Yeah, I'm naturally not very good. I have to focus. I have to consciously make an effort to just get everything out of my brain. John, what makes you think you're a good listener?
This will be interesting because I'm going to watch Tasha's facial expression very carefully during this.
I wasn't going to say anything, Darren, but
I wait for the eyebrows.
It's a simple one, really. I'm dyslexic, so I've had to teach myself different techniques, and one of those is always asking a kind of question immediately to get more information out of the person that's just said something to me, and that's because my head is trying to register what they said in the first place. So I've just taught myself to ask 1 or 2 more questions so that I've actually understood what's first been said to me, while it's then absorbing what else has been said to me.
When do you think of those questions?
some are standard. So I'll have ones like, that's an interesting point. Tell me more. So I've got those kind of standard ones that I can do, which is when I'm feeling uncomfortable or I'm not following what's going on. And certainly in a sales situation, bearing in mind majority of the time I'm selling, so I'm trying to get requirements out of the client. I'm trying to understand what their needs are. It's a case of just making sure that I've understood what they said. Otherwise, I write a proposal based on a load of requirements that don't actually exist.
Yeah, and that's the key thing, isn't it? It's sometimes what we can be guilty of doing, and I'm not accusing you of this at all, John. What we can be guilty of doing is when we're listening, we're starting to formulate the question while people are talking, because we hear a trigger word or we hear something, we go, oh, I want to know more about that. So we start to think about that, and we kind of lose the track, and we sometimes can miss bits there. But if they're standard questions that you kind of know, I might hazard a guess that sometimes you might not listen because you know you're going to ask them to tell you more, so you may drift off in there. If I was being but lovely, right? Thank you, and thank you for being brave. And after me criticising, saying that nobody's a good listener, for going in there and going, yeah, I am. Which is fab. Thank you.
I think what rang true for me, Helen, was when you said about the beginning about clearing your head, because certainly, I mean, I working in HR, it's part of what I do. But sometimes it is that sustained listening. If somebody is kind of talking for a huge length of time. But I think the other thing that I learned was allowing for a space for a silence as well. So, but it's hard, you know, after a day where I've really been listening, I'm exhausted. I do find I have to really concentrate on it. But I read I can't remember what it's called now. I know I read a book about allowing time for silences, where the person I'm listening to can say a bit more, but also I can then think about what I want to say next, and then being nothing wrong with the silence in the room for, feels like forever, but actually it's fine. But yeah, clearing your head it certainly rang true.
Yeah, and we're all not all afraid, but quite a lot of people are afraid of silence. And we don't like to leave that pause. And actually some people, just because they stop doesn't mean they've finished. And I'm terrible for leaping into that gap. And literally I will do this to stop myself. You can always tell if I'm trying not to talk, because I'm thinking, right, have they got more to say? Especially if it's somebody that you know is a bit more reflective and takes a bit more time to think about things. But it's that two-way conversation, but making sure that you're focusing on the listening. Because otherwise it's just a chat, and chats are great, but you still want them to be purposeful in terms of the workplace. So the next thing is about relationship building. So we need to know our people on a different level now than we did before, and it's about understanding who they are, understanding their motivators, understanding what makes them tick, helping people to focus on the things that they're really good at. I think as businesses, quite often we spend too much time focusing on what people aren't great at, and we spend so much time trying to develop their gaps that aren't necessarily going to help them massively, rather than focusing on their strengths and their good points. But also helping us to understand what's lost with hybrid working. So like I love the way that, so for the MGroup, there's that whole different range of ways of working together. And that's really important for people to make sure that they don't lose the social side of things. They don't lose the mentoring opportunities or the chances to prove their capability within an organization. But it's about understanding everybody's motivators. And I'm going to flick through this next slide just because we don't have a huge amount of time to talk about that. But once we get to know people on a deeper level, understanding their motivators helps to deepen those relationships and then shift where we focus and how we engage people within our business as well. Flexibility and agility are critical skills as well. So we need to be flexible in terms of our thinking, in terms of our emotions, in terms of learning, our approach to learning, and around the decision making as well. So as a society, we've kind of lost our ability to wait for things. I had a conversation with my son just before Christmas, which feels like 2 minutes ago, and we were talking about delaying him getting something because he was going to get it for Christmas. And I said to him, the problem is you don't understand, you don't know how to wait for anything. They said, I do. Amazon Prime doesn't come till the next day. And it's that whole thing of like, oh my God, this whole generation that just doesn't understand waiting, but that sometimes we have to have that flexibility to be able to learn and absorb and pull in more information before we start to make instant reactions to everything. So making sure that we are allowing people to have the agility to change and make different decisions, but that we give them time to think about things and take on board that information. And combine that with the communication and relationship building means that you've got a really, really strong workforce who are bonding on a different level and who are working together at a different level. And then finally is emotional intelligence. And that's emotional intelligence, understanding your own emotions, being able to manage those emotions, also being able to understand and recognize other people's emotions and how you use those within that relationship building, but also empathy and compassion. So these are, this is one thing I'm going to stop sharing now, because I do want to be able to see the accountants' faces when I'm talking about empathy and compassion as key skills for managers. And I think, I know, and these are lovely accountants, so they're the perfect ones to be doing it with. So it's very much around, we've been through a tumultuous 18 months. Our people have been through change. Everybody's been through a massive amounts of change. People have lost their jobs, they've lost family members, they've been ill, they've been bereaved. There's been a whole huge range of things that we've gone through on a societal level that we haven't necessarily done before. And as managers, it's absolutely critical that we bear that in mind as we move forward. The key things that I want to kind of just now focus on, because I'm very conscious of time, is just look at, just ways that you can actually, in fact, I won't do it with, what am I doing? Oh, why am I recording this? And I'm just suddenly making a hash of it. So just the things that you can do. So if you, basically this is different now. These soft skills are very, very soft skills. There's nothing there about P&Ls, bottom lines, things like that. But actually, these 4 skills will have a massively productive benefit to your bottom line as well. Because I have some more statistics. Engaged teams generate 200% more revenue and 21% more profit. Disengaged employees cost UK businesses up to £70 billion a year. So making sure that you build these relationships and engage your people actually helps people to be engaged and be more and deliver more for the business as well. So how you can support your managers is making sure that you give them time to develop those relationships with their people. Too many businesses at the moment have people in management roles, but the majority of the time is focused on technical tasks, when actually not enough time is given to focus on those relationship building and the reviews and the one-to-ones and all of that side of things. And it might be that part of creating that time is by delegating roles down through the business, which actually has an advantageous benefit to everybody, because what you're doing is you delegate tasks, you're growing and developing people further down the business anyway, and freeing up time for managers to manage people rather than to manage things. You can do a skills gap analysis. I will send the slides through so you can send them out to people. And there's a link there to the skills gap analysis that people can do. So it's a free, quick one, which is only 10 key questions around 10 key skills, leadership and management skills, that can actually help people to understand where those gaps are. So as a business, you can help them to fill those gaps, and then supporting the managers to fill those soft skills gaps. But the key thing actually is to model the behaviours that you want to see. So making sure that as a leader within your business, that you are modelling the style and type of behaviour that you expect your managers to deliver, which means the way that you expect your people to be treated, because that will in fact cascade down through the business. So that was a quick romp through where we are at the moment, the key skills your managers need and how you can support them. Any questions?
I think not a question. Sorry, not a question, but just an observation. I think Darren would back me up. You know, all the things you're saying, you know, are just at the total of our focus at the moment. And you know, we've had to come up with a real flexibility plan, not had to because we want to, but, you know, engage with the managers. And I guess the question, you know, the one that you put there that's sort of occupying a lot of my thoughts is, you know, what is lost for the hybrid working? Because we're definitely going to be in that scenario. And how do we keep everyone having that same team spirit whilst they're in different locations, maybe contacting by social media or things? Yeah, and that's probably one of our hardest challenges, I think.
And that's where that relationship management comes in, because people who were purely remote workers, but even before COVID, people who purely work remotely actually had higher levels of engagement with their organizations, because they had set up their business to have that remote working and to make sure that those relationships were built, and those remote workers were very much made to feel part of the team. And they've always had higher rates of engagement than hybrid workers, and that people were forced into working from home through COVID as well, which I always find fascinating.
Thank you.
Sorry, do you mind if I ask? Oh, yeah. Sorry, Nick, you've got your hand up. Do you want to go?
Sorry, I was looking for my hand up on my reactions. I haven't got a hand, so I've got a thumbs up, so I do apologise. Let me just turn that off. I've turned it off now, I can't. My question, Helen, was how do we engage with people who are, let's be honest, have either been forced to work remotely or are taking that opportunity because of what's happened, and maybe they don't feel safe going back into the work environment. But how do we as employers engage, as managers and employers, engage with these people 3-4 months down the line as we get into the winter months and flu will come back? This is likely to get a little bit worse before it gets better next year, I suppose. How do we engage with those employees?
It's about building that trust. And I think one of the challenges for a lot of businesses is that they haven't been having these conversations previously. And the communication, as I said, it's been very, very one way. And so people aren't always as receptive because they're suspicious. And I've heard some horror stories of how people have been treated over, certainly in the first lockdown. But it's just about taking the time to get to engage with that individual, understand their perspectives, understand their situation, and look at how you work together to create a way forward that works. Because if you've got people with experience and knowledge, you don't want to lose them purely because they don't want to be back in the office 5 days a week. It's about, you know, that flexibility it used to be a nice to have, now it's becoming a necessity because they have got the opportunities to go elsewhere. You know, the majority of jobs now are advertised with a part working from home option for most people. And it's just about those relationships and working out what will work for everybody, because it's got to work for everybody. Because as an organization, you know that if you give too much to someone and you don't get anything in return, the business starts to feel resentful about that, and vice versa. But honestly, the only way to do it is to have those really open, honest conversations. But that can take time to build that trust, to be able to have those really honest conversations. And again, that's where people don't put the time in to keep having those conversations. Or you can go down the PDP route and, you know, just go, this is the way on the highway, but that's not really long term, is it?
No,
I also worry about kind of the long-term impact. I mean, I see all the positives of flexible working and everything else, but you know, I was interviewing a graduate yesterday for a role within one of my clients' businesses, and actually one of her concerns was she sort of wanted flexible working because that's what people have got used to. But you talked at the end there about kind of learning from other people, and I go back to my first jobs, and actually the life skills that you learn that are useful now, so those managers of the future, if you like, about watching those interactions, even if you're not involved in them, but you see them, you hear them, you can feel that tension if someone's walked out of a bad meeting or something like that. All of those things that then over years do build up to your skills and your knowledge that won't be there anymore because you're not having that. And certainly one of the things that I'm encouraging people to do is also there's reverse mentoring. So when you talked earlier about that kind of the communication, if you like, that you learn from the younger people and realize they've got something to bring in. But also encouraging kind of buddying systems. So if you have got more flexible working, there is kind of coffee break times that are sort of initiated with somebody that you've paired up with, because I do think that learning when you're starting out in your career that you absorb because you're in an area where there's lots of other people is really valuable. And it does sort of worry me that we'll have a longer term impact of people being perhaps less understanding of others with challenges, or and those kind of things is a worry.
Yeah, and I know sort of in big organizations it's one of the priorities they are working on is how do they get that learning by osmosis.
Yeah.
And I think this is why the hybrid model works so much better than the pure remote working at early stage careers, because you do miss out. Now, I wouldn't have had anywhere near the career I got if my dog if I hadn't had the opportunity to just be mentored and unofficial mentoring from people that I just used to pigeonhole by the coffee machine, and those types of things. So yeah, it's a real big challenge.
Challenges, hasn't it, in terms of thinking, okay, because when we've been speaking to the team, it's often actually there's the younger ones that, given the choice, they'd be in the office 5 days a week because, well, for the social side, but also from a development point of view, where it's those that are more experienced, need less supervision, or some of them would be work at home all of the time. So it's, as you say, the only way around it is probably to have those conversations and to sort of help develop, so they're thinking, okay, what else do I bring kind of to the team by actually having some presence in the office. So but that only comes out through conversations. I think you're right, Helen.
So Jeff,
yeah, Helen, just building on some of the general theme from Heidi, from Darren, from others, I don't know whether it's kind of a contradiction or we're in danger of generalizing too much, but there's a view from many of us, and you hear on the media as well, that the younger people are the ones that have a higher expectation of flexibility within work environment, within the arrangement, the hybrid model you referred to. And then at the same time, we're hearing that they're the ones that actually need more contact, more interaction, more physical interaction, benefits of collaboration, meeting other people, the social side that Darren just referred to there. I'm just interested in kind of observations on that. Is it a contradiction, or is it a case that we should just be, I think as you implied, receptive and listening to each individual and their needs, and trying to find a way to respond at an individual level, as well as thinking about the wider needs of the team and the business?
Yeah, I think it is very much that. It's that's where the biggest shift is coming. Is we've gone from being a herd almost of people working in an organization to it being much more around that individual needs and requirements and trying to meet all of them. And it's where there's that mindset clash between the people who are going, well, hang on a minute, I never got that when I was 24 and wanted to go off mountain biking on a Friday. Why should they? And those 24-year-olds going, well, I want to go mountain biking on Friday, so I'm going to go and work somewhere else that'll let me do it. And it is very much on a one-to-one basis. And I think if you're going to have a model of flexibility, there will always have to be caveats around that, because you still have a business to run at the end of the day, and unless your business is profitable, then it's not a business, is it? So it's about finding something that works for both parties. But that is bringing it down to that individual level now. And I think this is again where the time and the conversation needs to be invested in that, because actually that person working 4 days who's getting exactly what they need is probably going to be more productive in those 4 days than somebody working 5 days but not happy and satisfied with what and how they do it.
It's also balancing the fairness, isn't it? Because I know where I've worked in the past where you've had manufacturing plus other roles, and there been almost more instances of kind of disgruntled employees because actually the production line weren't allowed to be as flexible because of various other reasons. Yet if you had a more of a desk-based job, you were given flexibility. And then we had employees kind of going, oh, I've saved loads in petrol because I haven't had to drive into work. And then you've got all your kind of production guys going, well, I haven't been able to save that money, so is there any chance I can get a pay increase to balance that? You know, and it opens up quite a lot of challenges.
Yeah, it's not going to be easy. It's really not.
Helen, the point Heidi made is an interesting one. So if we call it the non-desk jobs, are people, is the same pressure there to try and do it? Are people trying to come up with different solutions in what we're calling non-desk jobs, if that's the right title?
Yeah, I think people are looking at how they can balance it. And it might not necessarily be to do with the time side of things. It might be a financial recompense or something, you know, it might be a different way of looking at it, or looking at, can you split jobs? And the best employers are looking at how can you shift things for everybody. But there's always going to be an understanding. If you're driving a bus, you can't drive that bus from anywhere other than in that bus. Or if you're, you know, lorry drivers, what have you, you know, essential roles that we need. But then it's around recruiting the right people for that job. It's about making sure that you get the people in who want to do that, who absolutely understand the requirements of that role, but also putting that awareness around that people might not stay in that role for as long as we traditionally used to. So having a more flexible plan around recruitment and around workforce planning, and again keeping those conversations going, so you know when those people are starting to get dissatisfied with what they're doing, so you can plan and refill those roles.
Such a key area, isn't it? Because most of the clients I'm talking to, a lot of clients, it's just really hard to fill vacancies, to get skills. So all these things just become so important.
Yeah, and it's a massive problem at the moment, because that scales have shifted. You know, for so many years it was in the employer's favour, and suddenly it's shifting and people have more choices and more options, and businesses everywhere are having to make massive shifts and changes in order to get the right talent for their business.
There's other aspects of flexibility as well. You know, I was reading yesterday about somebody that was just over the moon because their employer allowed them time off to, we talked about somebody having a vet issue. This one, you know, actually just doing those kind of things. Or, you know, it could be you're allowed one mental health day a quarter or something. You know, there's lots of other different ways that companies, I think, are being quite imaginative on, or some are, on what flexibility is. And it's not necessarily about whether you work in an office or not, but actually you're in an environment, as you say, that says, you know what, if you've got a pet, then if you make it early morning or late, we're not going to ask you to take leave for that. And someone goes, oh, you know, they're listening to my needs now, and that means a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think that's been great. I think it's really, really, you know, a key thing for, you know, any businesses that have, you know, people other than themselves, you know, working in them. So I think it's a big challenge, as you say, the fact that it's so easy now, and people have broader horizons, can go and work for, you know, in places that they would never have been able to work before because of the flexibility that's given. So, and obviously we all need people. So, yeah.
Darren, I think this would be kind of, you know, if opportunity allows, really good one to follow up on again. I think, you know, times obviously restricts us continuing discussion, but I just think it's such a key area that it's one that if we can, you know, follow up at some point, be really good.
Yeah, I think so.
Fabulous. Thank you.
Well, no, thank you, Helen. That's been really, 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 you know, insightful, and yeah, really just on the money in terms of things that happen, I think, in, you know, lots of businesses at the moment. So really appreciate your time.
Very well. I'm just trying to figure out why it's not letting me stop recording.